Hi and welcome to the final presentation for the Gourock Infrastructure Outline Business Case. Now that we've completed our baselining, set our transport planning objectives and developed a range of options for the infrastructure, this presentation covers how the project team appraised these options to determine the current preferred option for the redevelopment of the terminal. This presentation provides more information on the appraisal of the 6 options against both the TPOs and the STAG criteria. It also confirms how we arrived at the current preferred option, and the scoring provided has been discussed at length and agreed with the project working group. This first section looks at the appraisal of the options against the TPOs. As a reminder, TPO 1 looks to provide appropriate terminal infrastructure to accommodate the in-scope vessels for a minimum of 60 years. This TPO is of particular importance to the alternative mainland port facilities at Gourock. You can see in the table that this objective is split into a large number of sub-criteria, which ensures that the preferred option can provide safe and appropriate terminal infrastructure both for the vessels and for those working and using the terminal. All of the options provide suitable berth length, fendering, mooring, and improve access to vessels. All of the options also provide adequate overnight berths, marshalling, and car parking facilities. The appraisal against TPO 1 also considers the safety of passengers and crew accessing the larger vessels. For example, with option 4, passengers would be required to cross a higher number of roads to access the waiting room and then onto the vessel, and so it doesn't score as well as the other options. The orientation of the berths and the link span also influences the appraisal here, with options 3 and 4 scoring poorly. The reason for this is that the berths are not positioned into the prevailing conditions, and the larger vessels may find it difficult to manoeuvre onto or off of the berths in certain conditions. This is reflected in the overall score against TPO 1, with option 1 coming out best, as agreed with the project working group. TPO 2 looks to improve the reliability and punctuality of the scheduled passenger services, which relates to the Dunoon and Kilcreggan services. All 6 options contribute to improving reliability through improved berth orientation, provision of dedicated berths for the passenger vessels, and provision for 2 passenger vessels to load or unload simultaneously. All 6 options also aim to provide improved access for passengers and crew. The sub-criteria which drives the overall score against TPO 2 is the removal of conflicts between the passenger service and the unscheduled AMP service. Option 1 scores the best here as it provides the furthest physical distance between the separate facilities at Gourock. TPO 3 looks to provide improved access to sustainable travel links. All 6 options aim to improve access to and from the vessels. They also aim to better define the pedestrian routes throughout the terminal and improve the definition of the national cycle route. So therefore, the sub-criteria which drives the overall score against this TPO relates to the distance that passengers have to travel to reach the train station, bus stops and taxi rank. Options 3 to 6 score best here, as the passenger berths are positioned to the north of the site and are closer to the train station and onwards travel. TPO 4 looks to minimise any impacts to the service and limit any disruption during construction works. Long term, all 6 options will provide compatibility between the shoreside infrastructure and a range of new vessels. However, all options are likely to cause some short-term disruption during the construction phase. Option 3 scores a neutral here as it would cause the least disruption, and phasing of the works would allow for the services to remain operational throughout the construction phase. TPO 5 relates to the future use of the terminal and ensuring that we allow flexibility in our designs. The appraisal here considers whether the infrastructure layouts could be extended or increased in the future. It also considers how straightforward it would be to provide new CalMac headquarters at the terminal. Overall, options 1 and 5 scored best as they provide the most opportunities for future development at Gourock. Lastly, TPO 6 is related to improving traffic flows in and around the terminal. So all 6 options will improve traffic flows around the terminal and will look to minimise congestion. All 6 options also improve the definition and visibility of the national cycle route. The appraisal also considers the proximity of exit lanes from the terminal to the south of the site in order to mitigate queues of traffic to and from the terminal. This TPO also considers the distance that passengers are required to travel to reach the train station, bus stops and taxi rank. Overall, options 5 and 6 score best, as the passenger services are provided closer to the train station and pedestrians are required to cross fewer roads in comparison to other options. Having agreed on all the scores for each option against the TPOs, the project team applied the agreed weightings to determine the ranking of the 6 options. The table on the slide shows that overall option 1 comes out on top and best meets the transport planning objectives. Option 1 is closely followed by option 6, which also scores well against the TPOs. Options 2 and 5 still meet the requirements and scored similarly, but they are considered to be less effective at meeting the TPOs due to the location of the link span and the proximity of the passenger services to onward travel. Then options 3 and 4 scored poorly, as there were concerns over navigational safety to the link span berths for both of these options. The next few slides provide more information on the appraisal of the 6 options against the STAG criteria. Each STAG criteria comes with a pre-defined list of sub-criteria as provided by the Transport Scotland methodology. For the environmental criteria, all construction work is likely to have an impact on the environment. This is reflected in the overall scores in the table being negative for all 6 options. As we move to detailed design, the project team will ensure that the relevant studies, permits, licences and mitigation measures are in place as required by the consenting authorities. As you can see in the table, the environmental sub-criteria consider potential impacts of each option in relation to noise and vibration, air quality, landscape and visual amenity, among others. Overall, option 2 scores the worst against the environmental STAG criteria, as we anticipate this option would have the greatest volume of materials used during construction and the longest construction programme. There are 2 predefined sub-criteria in the STAG safety appraisal, and these are accidents and security. Here, the project team considered things like navigational safety, likelihood of conflicts relating to the use of the marshalling area, use of the landside infrastructure, the ability to group operational areas, and the ability to provide suitable passenger access. Overall, option 1 scores best against the safety criteria as it has the most water area for manoeuvring of large vessels. It has good traffic flows around the site, and the operational areas are grouped together and are easy to segregate. Again, there are 2 predefined sub-criteria in the economy appraisal, as shown in the table. Essentially, all options score well against these sub-criteria as they are providing some improvement to reliability as the infrastructure is being designed for the in-scope vessels. These improvements to reliability at the terminal could have a positive impact on the wider economy. There are 3 sub-criteria in the STAG integration appraisal, as shown in the table. This considers how the proposal fits with other transport-related infrastructure. It considers planning guidance and wider policies from both local and wider government. Overall, options 5 and 6 scored best, as these options provide the passenger facilities closest to onward sustainable travel. These also provide an improvement to the alternative mainland port facilities at Gourock. The last STAG criteria relates to accessibility and social inclusion, and it assesses any changes in accessibility provided by each of the options. The scores here are driven by the proximity of the passenger service to onwards travel and the level of direct connectivity provided by each option. So for this reason, options 3, 4, 5 and 6 all score well, as these provide more direct connectivity and are in closer proximity to the train station for foot passengers. This slide provides a summary of the scores against the STAG criteria. It's worth noting that overall, all options scored fairly positively, with options 5 and 6 scoring the best, followed by options 1 and 3, and lastly options 2 and 4. The last few slides allow us to summarise how we arrived at the current preferred option as a result of the appraisal and consultation with the reference group. From the summary table, you can see that option 1 scores best against the TPOs and second best against the STAG criteria, and option 6 scores second against the TPOs and first against the STAG criteria. So as mentioned in the main presentation, we presented these findings to the reference group, which included community councils in May of this year. Their feedback led to the decision by the project team that option 6 should be considered the preferred option for the infrastructure at Gourock. The project team completed a comparison exercise for option 1 and option 6, and option 6 was selected as the preferred. As you can see on this slide, the key factors for selection of option 6 included the proximity of the passenger service to sustainable travel links, improved traffic flows compared to other options, and lastly, the feedback from the reference group was for option 6 to be the preferred option. Thanks for listening, and I hope that this presentation has provided additional useful information on the selection process of our current preferred option at Gourock.